Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about another controversial topic. We're going to be talking about transgender people transitioning at an early age. Now, when we talk about transitioning, you'll see we're going to be reviewing a video, so we're going to be talking about the context of this video, where transitioning has two meanings. It means transitioning medically, so getting the procedures to fully change into man or woman, depending. Transitioning in terms of asserting the fact that you are in fact either male or female when you were not born male or female. So there was a video that was posted on this morning on YouTube, and it's titled, "Are Children Transitioning Unnecessarily?" And in this video, there's a debate obviously on that. Now, Bergdorf is the transgender model who was fired from L'Oréal for making political race type comments. Now, if you don't know about that, I can link a video I did about that.
To you both. Now, the Tavistock Centre is the only NHS transgender clinic for children, and the centre received less than 100 referrals in 2009, but last year received more than 2,000. Why do you think that is?
Definitely because there's more information out there. I think that times are changing and the way that we think about gender is changing. A lot of people are of the mindset now that gender is different to biological sex and that gender is on a spectrum and it's identity that's impacted by different factors such as society or just generally the way that what you're exposed to.
This whistleblower teacher who was called Carol in the paper, she made 5 main points, and we'll cover those points as we go through our chat. First point: too many children are being wrongly allowed to transition or identify as non-binary, neither male nor female. Too many children.
Yeah, I suppose as a psychotherapist, what I'm going to say is that there's a kind of mismatch between somebody's perceived sense of who they are, their minds and their bodies. And the question is, if there's a kind of a mismatch like that, what do you do? Do you alter your body to fit in with your mind, or do you alter your mind to fit in with your body? The concern is that if there are too many children going down the medical route, they may make irreversible changes to their bodies. Excuse me, just let me finish, if you don't mind. And it's a child protection issue, because if somebody did transition for the wrong reason, for instance, they were autistic and felt that they could solve their emotional problems by medically transitioning, then the problem with that would be that they could discover that later on they hadn't really got the benefit that they thought they would.
Can I just interject with...
Okay, so far I think that everything that this guy, Bob Withers, is saying is rational to me. It doesn't seem that he has a hatred for transgender people. It doesn't seem like he's being too lenient. And he's also speaking as a psychotherapist, so I do think that this is a person who is knowledgeable enough based on what they've seen and what they've experienced to have a good idea of the realities of people who transition or want to transition. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I have absolutely no issue with transgender people, because why would I? Monroe Bergdorf is going to start talking in a little bit. She tried to interrupt him while he was speaking, as you saw, and I want you to just keep in mind how he is voicing his opinion versus how she voices hers. In the end, I actually agree with Bergdorf on certain things, but the thing is, the way in which she voices her opinions is very aggressive. Now, you just watch and make up your mind.
That because I think that we need to be really, really careful about how we are referring to transgender children. There's the myth that transgender children are medically transitioning, when really what we need to be doing is supporting these children in exploring or expressing their gender identity. And the reality is that the children are not having sexual reassignment surgery. They're expressing their gender, whether or not that's binary, from male to female, female to male, or non-binary, as they don't identify with a gender identity or don't identify with a binary gender. So when they're not medically transitioning, as they're not, all that parents and teachers can do is support them and use the pronouns that they want and that they choose themselves, and encourage them to express themselves with clothing or hairstyles or...
Well, you're talking about sort of medical intervention, but it's 18 for reassignment surgery, yes. 16 plus for hormone injections with parental
Absolutely,
consent.
but if a child or if a teenager is old enough to be having sex, to be taking contraceptive pills, then they're old enough to have autonomy over their own bodies to decide who they are as a human being.
One of the other points that was made of being trans is in vogue and a fag. Fad. Trans children operate in powerful cliques which groom and encourage other pupils to transition.
I found this really concerning because she was saying that trans kids are popular, like it's some sort of abomination, like it's a bad thing, when it's better that trans kids are popular and that they're doted on by their peers.
So I think that this one went right over Bergdorf's head, because the article was referring to transgender people being popular, not because it's bad that they're popular and that their classmates like them, but like with any popular thing, some people jump onto the bandwagon just to jump onto the bandwagon, not because they feel a certain type of way, not because they have dysphoria, not because they feel like they're born in the wrong body, but because they think it's cool. The same way that kids start smoking because it's cool or whatever, you know, like we have so many stereotypes that emphasize how popularity really can guide younger teens or children to think a certain type of way. So when they're saying that it's popular, that's because trans trending is a thing, and I've seen some on YouTube, but anyway, it's a thing. So when they're saying it's popular, it's not an abomination. It's just like you shouldn't be making a life-changing decision like choosing to have a sexual reassignment surgery when you're not doing it for the right reasons. So when she's talking about being careful about how we talk about this, sure, but at the same time, what Withers is saying is completely rational. Like, you need to make sure that a person wants to transition for the right reasons, because there are plenty of people who, as you'll see later in the video, have changed their mind. That doesn't invalidate transgender people, and that doesn't invalidate what those people who changed their mind are going through, but doctors are there to make sure that you don't make some mistake you'll never be able to correct fully. Why is this so hard to grasp?
Courage to be themselves by their peers. And really, I think that that's what's happening, is that kids are being much more accepting.
Is it a fad?
Well, there's some reason for this huge increase in numbers, and we need to understand why. Nobody really understands why. It needs properly researching, and we need to protect children from wrongly transitioning. There may be some people who end up being very happy doing medical treatment.
Children aren't having sexual reassignment surgery.
Excuse me. Yeah, children don't have sexual reassignment surgery, but once they start with puberty blockers, nearly 100% go on to fully medically transition, whereas if you don't start those blockers, about 80% spontaneously go back to their original gender. We don't know much about gender identity, but we know it's quite normal for somebody to identify with the opposite gender to their biological sex and then spontaneously desist. If we put them on medication, the problem is that we're likely to encourage them to go the full route down the medical transition. I have no problem with people expressing gender diversity, celebrating different roles so we don't get caught up in stereotypes of masculinity, femininity. I think that's absolutely right, and we should affirm kids in what they want and what they feel. But if we treat them medically without actually knowing what we're doing and what the long-term consequences are, we're storing up a medical problem.
But that's why all of the medical procedures are there, why you go to certain services, such as the Tavistock Clinic, to seek out help and seek out guidance. But if you're not doing that, as your patient that you mentioned, someone that didn't seek out counsel and had sexual reassignment surgery, then went back 25 years later, but the general numbers are not there to say that trans people
this person that you're referring to did actually go through the correct procedures and had the sessions such as are offered at the Tavistock. The problem is people come up with the idea that they're going to get better through the surgery, and they're coached into what answers to give in those sessions.
This is a very small
This is not small. This is a huge number of people. There's a huge number of people in Finland who all say that they spent their childhood in the forest alone, imagining that they were male wolves.
Okay, this forest thing is about to take off, and that's a whole other thing, so let me just get in my comment now. So one thing that really frustrates me about this video is that Bergdorf is speaking as if she's an authority. Now, she can speak on the transgender experience, what she went through on the surgery, sure, but the fact that she's disagreeing with him over numbers, yet she doesn't have any numbers, and she is a model, that is her job. His job is a psychotherapist. I'm just kind of... It doesn't really make sense to me that she would assert that she knows what the numbers are like when I just really don't think that's the case. But anyway, I think that if the rule is that at 16 you could start with hormones, that's fine. But I also don't think you should just throw hormones at anyone who says that they think they're transgender, because maybe it's wrong. And like I said, I don't undermine or underestimate transgender people, but at the same time, human error does exist. How many times did we think we were something and then we weren't, you know? And sometimes you're right. And if you're right, you're going to get through and you're going to get your hormones. But if you're wrong, there should be someone to check and stop you, just to be like, hey, you know, like maybe this isn't the route you're supposed to go. And I thought that what he was saying about the solution was very interesting, because I feel like I see that a lot with people who have children. You know how we see those movies about people who have children to try and fix the broken marriage, but in reality it's the marriage that's broken and the children don't fix anything? It's interesting because clearly he has seen some cases that are like that. And I think that for some people who are mistaken about being transgender, maybe that's what they think, you know, the people who just are having other problems and they put all their eggs in this transgender basket. So they're like, okay, well, this must be it, the same way that people do it with children. So I think that's interesting. I don't think that's a high percentage, but I think that it's a possibility. The fact that Bergdorf is shutting down every logical avenue is absolutely exhausting, because he's not saying transgender people are stupid. He's not saying that they don't know who they are. He's simply saying humans make mistakes, and this is a large mistake to make because it's not fully fixable. I don't know what the problem here is. Anyway, we're about to go into this forest example, and Bergdorf gets really heated, so just hold on to your wigs.
Because if you come into excuse me a minute, let me finish the story.
Kids to feral children.
When they come into the clinic, if they identify somebody who's transitioning in their adolescence, they're less likely to be given the treatment. But if they have a story that they've always thought of themselves as male, although they're female, they're much more likely to be put along the medical pathway. People know what to do in order to get the treatment, the medical treatment, and they fixate on that as a way of solving their problems. Monroe, sorry, please come in.
No, I'm just mind blown that you compare transgender children to feral children.
Not feral children, no, I'm saying that they imagine. They come up with a story that when they were kids...
It's not a story. What we need to be doing is listening to trans kids, because the statistics are showing that when transgender children aren't encouraged to express their gender identity, the levels of transgender children self-harming or thinking about self-harming or thinking about committing suicide, as reported by Stonewall, are so high. They're in the 80s.
Final.
So again, the point goes over Bergdorf's head, and you might say that I'm biased, but I agree with her on one thing. We should let people explore their gender identities. I think that that's healthy. I think that's the way you get to know yourself, and exploration really is generally a good thing, so I'm 100% on board with that. However, I just think it's extremely comical how Withers brings up this example where people would imagine themselves in the woods surrounded by male wolves, was it? They would imagine themselves, and it just... And Bergdorf is like, how could you compare them to feral children? And it's just like, you're saying that transgender kids, teens, shouldn't be made a mockery of, but then here you are denigrating what you thought were feral children. It's like, you're telling people not to undermine transgender people, and then you're undermining other people? Like, there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but okay. And then she obviously missed the point, because the point that Withers was trying to bring up is that if you know what to say, you'll get through. It's kind of like the same thing with immigration. If you know how to answer their questions properly, you're gonna get through. So I think that's a really big and important thing to consider, because it's like, if we have these kind of, let's call them roadblocks, that medical professionals are a roadblock that will decide whether you pass or don't pass based on the questions they ask you and the answers you provide. If you automatically know or kind of like act those answers out, you're going to pass, maybe even if you shouldn't, which puts your own well-being in danger if in fact you were mistaken and you either were having a specific period in your life, or if you were one of those people who's trying to fix something. There's a possibility that that's the case. Like, as much as I'd like to think that I always know what's best for me, no, not always. And it's the same with anyone who thinks they're transgender or who in fact is transgender. They might not always know.
Point here, many transgender children are also autistic, and this particular whistleblower questioned the legitimacy of their trans identity because of this. It obviously the Tavistock Centre sees adults, but it's reported that 35% of children referred to the centre from 2011 have been autistic.
But how many autistic people aren't transgender as well? I think we need to look at the balance there, and also the majority aren't autistic either. And I think that we also need to be, the two can be, apart, but they can be together as well.
Guys, I think we found our new Lord and Savior. Who would have known that some transgender people are autistic and some aren't? Can you believe Bergdorf invented intellectualism?
And I think that we also need to be, the two can be, apart, but they can be together as well.
My God. Wow. I'm so glad she was here to tell me that, because I wouldn't have known. But seriously, how stupid is it to say something like this? Like, oh, some people are transgender and autistic, but some aren't. Like, yeah, and like, you're not making any point. I just feel like she's so deeply rooted in this narrative that she wants to be correct that she won't even address other points, not even address them. And it's a shame, because I feel like there could have been a way better person to come argue her stance potentially, or argue as a transgender person what they experienced. But here she's categorically denying everything without giving any evidence or proof except for things that everyone agrees on or that is historically documented, like Stonewall. So also, I think it's really stupid that she's acting like being autistic would have no effect on you thinking whether you're transgender or not. If your brain functions in a different type of way, it's going to have an effect on everything. So just going to leave that there.
Monroe, we need to talk about how we can protect children here, because if somebody transitions because they're autistic and they think it's going to fix it, that is a tragedy. We need to protect that person.
What I have an issue with is the damning tone of this article, and the fact that it's in one of the papers that perhaps isn't the most progressive or protective over trans people. And when you, as a medical practitioner, go and add your narrative to a paper that is known for bigotry, that is extremely reckless.
Yeah, I wish the left-wing press would pick this up more. Really, very honestly, I'm very surprised that the Mail are the only people approaching people like me.
I'm not surprised, because the tone of your article was extremely irresponsible.
No, it
as
wasn't.
A medical practitioner.
It was a straightforward professional.
If you want to help children, then you're not doing it the right way.
We're talking about trying to protect children who may transision for the wrong reasons,
I can
and then
absolutely
be
say
really
that your
disappointed.
letter has made a lot of children's lives a lot harder.
On the other hand, other people might say that it's brought an important issue
Other
to
people
public
that hold your
attention.
bias, absolutely, but people
It's not a bias.
No, it's absolutely
Because
a bias.
if people transition because they're gay and struggling with that, and then they
Sexuality has
discover
nothing to do with
it does,
gender
because
identity.
Rupert Everett, for instance, said if he was alive at this time,
Rupert Everett is a gay man.
Yeah, but he said he probably would have transitioned if he'd been alive at this time, because he spent a time female identifying.
Well, let's not take Rupert Everett's
There's lots of people who say
word
that.
for anything. What's Rupert Everett an expert of?
Okay,
issues?
James Cantor is another.
Okay, so this is the part where my brain starts melting, because Bergdorf goes off on this whole tangent about her feelings about what Withers wrote. Now, I didn't see Withers' article. If it's linked, I'll link it in the description box below. But she was saying that it had a damning tone. Now, if I hadn't heard him speak about all of this for, the 8.5 minutes we did, I would potentially give her the benefit of the doubt. But the way he's speaking about transgender people, to me, does not seem like he's, hates them or is disgusted by them or anything. He's speaking logically. Genuinely, his argument is not everyone who thinks they're trans is trans. Is that entirely crazy? Now, I know that being trans isn't about sexual orientation, but if we can compare it to sexual orientation for a second, I know they're not the same, but it's like when you think that you're a certain orientation. That's not always true, because sometimes you need to explore more to figure out, am I really that, or do I just think I'm that, or is it kind of programmed in my brain or whatever. I spent a great deal of time thinking I was asexual. I think it was almost 6 years that I thought I was asexual. Turns out I'm not. There, I didn't have any real negative consequences. However, if I had done something to my body and modified it a certain type of way, and then I ended up not being asexual, that would have been a disaster. So what he's saying just seems like pure logic to me. And the fact that Bergdorf brings up the tone of his article and was saying how it made people's lives harder, it's so hypocritical, because the reality is she's not really helping anyone either. What is she out here doing? I genuinely don't understand, because if she were at least putting facts out there, that would be something. But she's not putting facts out there. She's denying everything. And honestly, she's making herself look a little bit like an extremist and making him look normal, because, well, he is normal in a logical sense. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think about all this. Do you think that people should be able to transition at a relatively young age? Do you think that going on hormones is okay as long as you're 16? What do you think about all of that? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll see you guys next time.